Hey, Brandon, welcome. Welcome to the room. Let me know if you can hear me. Thanks for joining us. Feel free at the top right, you can hit the chat button and you can just type in your chats right there. I'm going to give it a few more minutes. I'm having some people having some trouble getting in, so I'm walking through that now. Also want to make sure the live stream and everything seems to work. We're going to use the audience link. All right, Brandon, I see you popping up. I think you're switching between guest and audience. I'm not sure if there's a problem here, but let me know. Let's see who else is here. All right. All right. Let me see who else is in here. Seems like I'm having some issues with folks. sorting that out now. All right, what is in here? For those of you guys listening or streaming, listening, we're just waiting for some folks that are having some difficulties getting in the room, so I'm trying to navigate that with them right now. Let's see who else is in here. All right, there we go. Some link errors just got resolved, so we should be good to go. Brandon, again, thanks for joining in. I see you there. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started while people trickle in. Let me just check one more time, make sure everything is fixed and set. Looks like it is. And we are also good on YouTube as well. There we go. Should be good to go now. All right, so the link is working. Let me give a few more minutes. I see people in the waiting room, letting them in. Luis, you're in here. Thank you. All right, so looks like the link is working. Sorry for that a little bit. I think the link I sent out was to be a guest on the show. So you guys were popping up as my guests and leaving because you guys didn't want to be on camera or whatever. So that was my fault, but it's been resolved. You guys are able to join. For those of you in the room already, go ahead. It's in the top right in the chat box. That's where we're going to do most of the interactions. Again, this is live, so I'm going to be able to see your questions and comments real time. So I'm either going to reply directly to you in the chat box, or I'm going to reply just via sharing content. So yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for joining in. If you haven't already, again, this is for the community. This is for you guys. Put your name in and let us know your Instagram handle, whatever you want. That way you're identifiable and recognizable. Okay, there's some more people coming in. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get started in the sake of time. I see folks trickling in. Thank you. I know this is a Saturday afternoon. There's a lot of other things that you can be doing. But pleasure to have you here with me. I wanted to take a couple time. This is our first live webinar, so I just wanted to take time just to be able to share our approach to race day prep. So most of the stuff is going to be similar in terms of your drag racing, your half mile road course. Most of these are going to be the same. It's not tied to one specific, meaning this isn't the absolute way that you need to do things, but it definitely helps, right? It's going to help you plan accordingly. It's going to help you keep tabs on things before you get to the track. It's also going to help you keep tabs on things while you're at the track. So one example is I like to use is for the road course guys, tire temperatures. You know, you might or Corvette. The Corvette is not as heavy, but the Camaro is pretty heavy. So we got to be mindful of like how much wears on the tires, how much heat the tires are. We have all these fancy gauges, but the tires tell you a lot of things. So that's one example there. Another example is going to be for the drag racing guys. How do you know your burnout is too long or too short, right? Like what are some indicators that we look out for? So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. For those of you guys just joining in, again, I just see you guys trickling in now. Go ahead and in the chat box, once again, on the top right, you should see a chat box where you can ask your questions. I have 1, 2, 3, I have a few questions. I have 4 or 5 questions that have been DM'd to me. Folks maybe not be able to make it or have prior commitments that would like these questions answered. So when we come to the Q&A session, we're going to answer that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first things first, let's talk about our approach to racing, or not necessarily racing, but any kind of like either it's spirited driving or you're going to a road course or you're going to a quarter mile. Regardless of the platform, most of these are going to be the same. I'm going to stick to the GM platforms that we do the most, but most of these concepts and theories are going to be the same. So in our case, we have Abilene Shift Sector, which is a half-mile event coming up in Abilene, Texas. I want to say that's October-ish, mid-October. I have the dates in my calendar, and that's going to be a half-mile standing drag race. So no prep surfaces, no nothing. It's basically the equivalent of you street racing in the legal form. So you back up to the grid, you line up from a dead start, the hands point up, hand drops, and you go and you race side by side for a half mile. How you want to race is up to you. You can do a half mile standing start race, you can do a row race, 40, 50, 60 row, but yeah, that's it carries out to about a half mile. For context, a stock Camaro SS will do somewhere in the 130s, 133, 134. A ZL1, ZL6, anywhere between 144 and 148 stock. Varies manual, auto, etc. Hellcats are going to be the same thing, 144 or 148. So pretty much all these cars are relatively trapped the same speed. The lighter cars are going to be a little bit higher. So with that being said, what are some factors that we do when we're running the half miles, or some things that we like to consider or take into account? The first one is going to be heat. Heat. I always tell, we always tell our customers, we always preach our customers, especially the supercharged forced induction folks, heat is your worst enemy. If you're trying to shoot a personal best, or if you're trying to obtain the fastest lap time on the track, managing heat is going to be key to your success. So what do I mean by heat? What does that affect, right? Obviously you have your standard oil temperature, your blower temperatures, etc. But what I mean is, as we start beating on these cars, or as we start making pulls, that heat's got to go somewhere. And yes, we have an exhaust, we have everything. In this case, I'm going to use an LT4. Most of the folks in the groups, they either have a LT4 or they're supercharged, so I'm going to use that as a reference, and then I'll go over into the NA stuff. So most of the LT4 guys, it's a 1.7 liter blower, so it's not big, it's kind of small, on the smaller side, but it works, right? It's a great unit. it's fantastic. You drive the car. Let's say we start the car up, right? First thing we do is, okay, first of all, let's before we even load the car on the trailer, let's cover the basics. Let's check our oil. Okay, how long has it been since we did an oil change? Is the oil within the certain range that it needs to be? 10 quarts. If you have external coolers, it can go higher, but let's check that first. If it's been about 7,000 miles and you've been out, in Mexico making pulls left and right, or you've been at a track days, or you've been making passes down the quarter mile, or just enjoying the car on the weekend, chances are you want to start with a fresh oil change. Oil is going to lubricate the bearings. Viscosity comes into play. It's going to lubricate a lot of the engine components and distribute oil throughout the engine. So having used oil, or oil that's been beat up and been tarnished or just been used, is probably not a great idea when you're going to do 140 miles an hour plus, on a half mile, or you're going to do 120 miles an hour at the quarter mile, or you're going to spend 20-30 minutes in one session at the road course, and you're going to do 4 or 5 sessions. So something to think about. Oil is going to be key. So first things first, we're going to check our oil. Personally, for me, I like to start with a fresh change of oil. It really depends on your power level, but there's no such thing as, you're better safe than sorry like that. I am a firm believer of that. So first things first, check your oil. Make sure your oil is within the normal limits depending on the platform. How do you check the oil? You check the dipstick and you make sure it's within the range that it's there. So it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. Personally, like I said, I like to change my oil right before I start, or right before I'm going to a track day. My car makes pretty decent power, 980 to 1,000 plus to the wheels, depending on what dyno we use. So to me, I need to make sure that oil is fresh, it's new, and it's good to go. So first things first, check your oil. We covered that. The next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to do basically a once over on the car. Just walk around your car and just do a once over. Just that simple. Look for anything, right? Look at the tires, look at the brakes, look at any damage, look underneath the hood, look for anything loose. Maybe a headlight bolt is loose, or a strut tower cap, or look for obvious signs. And you might be wondering, well, why? Why do I have to do that? And the truth is, it's easier if you think of it as like a baseline, right? It is easier if you know the condition of the car before you go race, because if something were to happen, you know that, hey, that car wasn't like this when I started the race. So it takes, for our customers that we take out on the track and we coach and we do these visual walkthroughs when we do the safety inspections, the self-checks, we show them how to do that. It really clicks for them after their first session. There was a car that had a cold air intake. We took out on the track. We did a walkthrough the first time. We looked at everything. We looked at his plug wires, make sure that we're good to go. We set our hands on everything, so make sure the plug wires are good. Make sure the dipstick was good. Make sure the throttle body, your intake, all your clamps, all your sleeves. Make sure all that stuff's good and tight and good to go. So he looked at all of that. We showed him how to do that. We did that with our car before we went out. So he pretty much side by side mirrored what we did, and I was able to explain to him real time that these are the reasons why I do this. Fast forward to when he got out on the track, he did his first 20-minute session. He came back, popped the hood open, did a visual right after. I was like, oh man, hold on. I think this clamp came loose, because it wasn't like that when I did the inspection. And it was just a little cold air intake clamp. I guess he didn't tighten it so much when he installed it, or maybe he just, used a different clamp. I don't know what the case was, but the clamp was loose and he caught it right away, which was good, because if you understand how the ECU does calculations, it uses the mass airflow sensors, which is inside the cold air intake tube. So had he not found that, noticed that would have left unattended for the next 4 sessions. It was a private track day, so we had 5, 6, and I think we were doing 25-minute sessions. So had he not found that, come loose. That clamp could have easily slid off. That elbow would have came off. I mean, that, you know, the mass airflow readings wouldn't have been accurate. The car would have driven like crap. He could have really hurt his engine, but luckily he didn't. He caught it beforehand and he went from there. So to me, that's super, super, super important. It's very simple, but it's important, right? Do a visual, understand what state your car is, understand what what's missing, what's not. Like, hey, or do I have a nail in one of my tires? Are all my tires pretty even on wear? Like, is the car good to go, right? And hypothetically, we want to do this before we get on the track, not when we're on the track. The one that we do on the track should be more of like a double checking, just double checking, make sure it's good to go. For me, if I have a track weekend that I'm going Saturday and Sunday, I will spend that, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday looking over the car, right? Get the car up in the air, take the wheels off, inspect my brake pad thickness if you have the capability of doing that, or they sell these gauges that you can just put it up and measure your pad thickness. If you don't want to get the car up in the air, if you're able to get in there and use that. But those are some things that I do. So first one is obviously check your oil, make sure it's good to go, make sure you change your oil. Second one is do a visual, do a walk around the car, make sure everything is good, make sure your clamps are in place, and make sure you're ready to go. The third one that I like to use, this is more in underneath the engine bay, and I touched a little bit on this just now, is really look at your engine bay, like look inside there, and really focus on how are things sitting, right? This goes aligns with what we just mentioned. Like, hey, is my strut bar okay? Like, am I missing a bolt on my strut bar? Or is my strut tower brace okay? Like, do I have is one of the bolts missing for my suspension? And did I install coilovers or some kind of suspension that possibly ruined it, or maybe you did something? So I take that opportunity to look underneath the engine bay just to make sure everything is tight. Was I working on the car and maybe I dropped a 10 millimeter a 10 millimeter socket, and I just kind of said, oh, I can't find it, I'm going to leave it in there. Those 10 millimeters, they either fall on the belly pan, but they can fall in tight places. They can shred pulleys, belts, etc. So do your diligence and look for them. So I take that time to look underneath the hood and just get an overview of everything. So while I'm in there, I would be checking my oil. I personally keep track of how long my spark plugs have been in there. I know it's something so simple, but in my car, it makes it some decent amount of power. I usually go through a set of plugs just for safety. I'll replace a set of plugs, you know, if I do a shift sector, a road course, a half mile, and then I'm going to shift sector again in 2-3 months, I would check the plugs, you know, right before I go to that next shift sector. If everything looks fine, the plugs will tell you a lot. They'll tell you what to look for, what condition the engine's in. That's a conversation for another day. But for me, I do keep tabs on that, because spark plugs, although they seem so simple, they can really, really, really damage your build. So for me personally, at my power level, stock bar men, it'd be foolish of me not to check the plugs. And it's not that hard to do. Pull them off, look at them, make sure the wires, make sure the boots, make sure there's everything in place. Reinstall them or change them. Usually I ended up changing them just because of a sense of security. So use that time to look underneath the engine bay and point out any, you know, you'll be surprised what you'll see. You'll see loose clamps, obviously not right off the bat, but the more you use this car, the more you drive it, whether you're on your road course, spirited drives, you're turning and you're twisting and you're getting on the gas and you're getting on the brakes really hard, you're really moving that engine, right? You're moving the engine left and right, you're moving the chassis is tweaking, the suspension is loading and unloading, so you're really putting that car through its paces. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure and get a visual of the critical components. You'll be surprised, you see, you know, folks install headers or whatever the case may be, and they may not necessarily fit 100%, and it's, you know, they'll be resting on the spark plug cables and nothing will happen, but all of a sudden you take a hard right turn or a hard left turn and you start getting a misfire. Like your car is, you know, slugging, it's check engine light is on, it's not driving well, it's going to reduce power mode, and you know, this is something that you could have caught if you've been driving for a while. you look underneath the engine bay, chances are cylinder number 3 or one of the ones in the back, you would have seen it coming. You would have seen the burn and be like, oh wow, I either have to change these wires or, get a new set of headers or do something to resolve, wrap the headers, whatever the case may be. So that's the third thing that we like to do. We like to, again, check your oil. Second, do a walkthrough. Third thing, really focus on the engine bay and make sure all those components are good to go. So if you guys have questions so far, go ahead and type them in the chat box at any time. Feel free. I know some people are DMing me. I should probably look at my phone, but let me go see what's up really quick. Make sure there's no issues. There's just yep, there you go. A couple questions here. Sorry about this phone. Where are we at here? Let me answer this really quick. I'm gonna write this down for you. So folks are messaging me on DMing on Instagram, etc. I'm not sure why, but I'll take it. Okay, let me write this down real quick. Okay, cool. So I got that down. So we talked about 3 things right off the bat. We talked about changing your oil, doing a visual, and looking over the engine bay underneath the hood. Along those same lines, let's have a safety mentality in mind. We are going to be doing, in this case, we'll be doing a half-mile event. I'm going to keep it towards a half-mile, but again, this applies. So half-mile, that's 2,640 feet from a dead stop. So safety is key, because my primary concerns are going to be, A, can I get this car to leave off the line? And B, can I get this car to stop after I cross that half mile? A quarter mile pass could be anywhere from 8 to, 12, 13 seconds. A half mile pass tends to be 16 to 20 plus seconds. So we're pretty much doubling and some the time that we spent wide open throttle. So you have that right foot down for 16, 20 seconds. Think about the distance. You cover a half mile of distance, 2,640 feet, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is, because as soon as you cross that traps, or the traps is what we call the finish line, that's what traps your speed, so we just call it the traps. So as soon as you cross the traps, you have to stop. You have to stop right away, because your turnout is coming. And it's not, we're not doing 100, 120 miles. We're probably doing 140 to, in my case, 180 plus. So some of these cars, I really need to stop. So safety is key. And what do I mean by safety? So what I mean is your brakes. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of, I'm just going to buy these brakes. I'm just going to make this work. Personally, these stock brakes on our cars, if you have a Camaro, Corvette, CTSV, any of the performance cars, newer performance cars, so 2010 up to even 2008 C6 Z06s, the factory brakes are more than enough. They're designed to be able to stop these cars at those speeds, right? Like there's millions, if not billions of dollars that the manufacturers spend in testing and development to make this happen. So I trust their judgment, because they wouldn't release a product that says, hey, Corvette Z06, C6 Z06, top speed 198, Camaro Z01, top speed 200 miles an hour, and then leave you with brakes that can't stop the car at that speed. So what ends up happening for me is I always tell people, run your stock brakes first, and then see if you need an upgrade, because you may not necessarily need it. I've had stock brakes for a long time. I've upgraded brakes, just peace of mind, and I kind of needed it, but I've run the stock brakes for a while. I have customers that run the stock brakes for a while. So what do we look for when we do our brakes? Well, the first thing is going to be your pads. What are your condition of your pads? How thick are they? Do they have any life left. There's articles, I'm not going to get into too much detail here. The idea is we're going to talk about our approach to prepping for a half-mile event, but if we want to break these down in specifics, that's just going to take too much time, and I might have to loop in other folks because it's an area that I may not be very well versed on it. So let's stick to what we know. We're going to look at our brake pads. So generally, how do I do this? I put the car up in the air, I take off the wheels, the calipers are then exposed there on the rotors. I have these thickness gauges that you literally just put up against the rotor, and then you can, not against the rotor and the caliper basically, and you can stick it into where the pad would be, and it measures the pad thickness. So if you want to know about that gauge, or if this is something you want to do, definitely let me know. Ping over here in the chat, or just message me separately, and I'll send you the link to that. So what I normally do is I go on all four corners and I'll take those measurements. Okay, this is, it's X amount, 30 seconds, or whatever the measurement may be. And I just write those down. So before I go to the track day, I write those down. So I'll take on all four corners, take my pad thickness on all the four corners. And I'll say, okay, let me go to the manual, the dealership manual. You can look this up on the internet, on all data, whatever sources you have, and I'll compare it. And I'll say, okay, well, this is the factory thickness of my pads, or this is the factory thickness of, the new pads that I install. Usually when I get a new pad, I measure the OEM the thickness from the go before I put them in. So you take that and you say, okay, let's say, for example, I'm going to use a random number here. Let's say, for example, the pads start at 25 millimeters thickness. I will take that number and I say, okay, cool. Fresh new set of pads. I'm 25 millimeters on all four corners. That's great. We know the pads are brand new. They're not cracked. There's nothing that's indicating that these pads are failing. So we're in good shape. Let's install the pads. Let's measure them if they're already installed, and let's compare them to the baseline of what the minimum is. Some manufacturers might say, oh, you can degrade 4 millimeters or 2 millimeters or no less than this amount of thickness. It really varies, but take your benchmark, take your baseline, and write those down. So after you inspect the pads, normally, sometimes I'll go as far as removing the calipers. It really depends on the event and how long the pads have been installed. But generally on a newish car, you should probably get anywhere from 20 to 30,000 miles of pad life, and that's average, right? So that's an average of me driving down the highway, me doing pulls, me going to track days. So the average person, going on cruises, drives, occasional track use, should get between 20 to 30,000 miles on a set of pads, realistically. GM, so Camaro, Corvette, Z01, CTSV. So take that with a grain of salt. Double check if this is very dependent on your driving habits. If you're just pulling the car out on the weekends, it's going to last longer. If you're going out of control and just making pulls, you go to the grocery store and you're trying to get a new PB on your draggy, then they're not going to last that long. So take that with a grain of salt, but for the average person, I would expect somewhere between 20 to 30,000 miles. So now we've looked at our brakes, we looked at our pads, we've checked and we've said, okay, cool. Our pads are this thickness, this is the max, we're still within limits. The next thing I want to look at is the rotors. Okay, so the rotors, basically these pads, the brake pads are going to clamp up on the rotors, and it might seem a little bit advanced, but really it's not. The average person can do this as well. And I do micrometers, so I take depth gauges, and what I do is I measure my rotor thickness on different corners. So I'll pick 1, 2, 3. I'll pick 4 spots. Imagine we have a circle. I'll pick a spot here, a spot here, a spot here, and a spot here on my rotors, and then I'll measure that thickness out. So I'll take that on each rotor and I'll say, okay, well, these are the measurements that I got. The average, out of round, or the average wear on this rotors is this number. So I do that for each number and for each rotor. And what I do is I use it kind of like an inspection sheet. So let me see if I can draw it out here. I really like this because I can really draw it out over here. So this is just for reference, but hopefully you guys can see here. So what I like to do is obviously I'm going to cover myself here. So here's going to be, your front left, front right, rear right. I would mark my pad thickness and my rotor thickness on the front left, front right, rear left, and rear right. So I usually just draw a diagram, or there's sheets that you can print out. But I take these sheets and I measure them before we go to the track, and I say, okay, cool, fresh set. This is what I'm starting at thickness. This is what I'm starting at rotor thickness. And I do the same thing for the tires. I take a depth gauge and I say, okay, I have street tires, right? This is how much they're able to wear. You can go on Michelin if you have the 4S's. You can go drag radios, and our 888s are a little bit different. Their tolerances are smaller, but you can find that information and you can look it up for your specific tire and say, okay, with this tire, I'm allowed X amount of wear. I'm allowed, down to 430 seconds, 330 seconds, 230 seconds, whatever the maximum is. So what I do is I take a tire depth gauge, really inexpensive on Amazon or whatever, and again, measure at multiple places in each tire. So I would measure, in one area, another area, another area, another area, another area, and I would take the average of those measurements, right? And I would say, okay, well, this is where I'm starting on the front left, on the front right, rear left, rear right. So now I already have what my pad thickness is going to be. I already have my rotor. Is it warped? Does it have even wear? And I already have my tires. How deep, how much tread I have in my tires. How much have I worn them? And like are they good? Am I safe to go make 140 mile an hour pass, 150, 60, 70, 80 mile an hour pass? And the numbers are going to tell you, right? The numbers are going to tell you if maybe your rear right tire is worn and you had no idea because you can't visually see it. But you take your depth gauge and you keep taking readings and you say, okay, well, hey, my rear right tire is going on. It's worn. Something's wrong here. Or maybe you start seeing wear on the inside of your tire or the outside of the tire, right? These are indicators that as you do these, you're going to start asking yourself, well, what is causing this? Like, why is this happening, right? So if for example, if my rear tires are worn on the inside or the outside, you're going to know, okay, well, hey, my rear tires are worn. I have too little air. My rear tires are worn here. I have too much air, right? Or, hey, maybe my rear tires have a weird wearing there. It's just on this section of the tire. Oh, my alignment is off. My toe is off, right? So these are really indicators that are going to let you see firsthand. And some of my customers, they'll see this. I'll take their car. We'll be street tuning the car or whatever the case may be. And immediately I'll know, hey, your car needs an alignment. Your rear toe is off. And they're like, man, how do you know it's doing this? Oh, man, that's been happening to me for months. I have no idea what it is. I took it to the dealer 10, 11 times. They have no idea what it is. And I was like, yeah, this is what it is and this is why. And then they asked me, how do I learn that? Well, I learned that because I did this, right? So it seems simple. It may be silly for some of us, but I take safety very, very, very seriously when it comes to motorsports and racing. So I want to share with you guys, this is what I do, and just doing simple things like that actually has helped me to better understand like the characteristics, the behaviors, just the mechanics of what the car goes through. So. All right, so far, what have we covered? So we covered a visual inspection, right? Walking around the car, making sure everything is good to go. We covered your oil, making sure not only the oil was good within limits, but you're not going to go out there on, 10,000 mile oil and do a road course at 105 degrees for, 5 sessions of 20 minutes. You're not going to do that. So we talked about oil. We talked about your engine bay. Looking at your engine bay, looking at, is something loose? Am I missing something? Is there something that needs attention? And overall, is the engine in good health? Like, did I leave a screwdriver from when I was working on the car? Did my 10 millimeter happen to fall in the engine bay? don't know, right? So this is why we're doing these inspections. Pretty simple. Most of the race shops, they charge to do this, and you're probably like, well, why am I paying these people $200? Well, it's because it takes time to do this. And you may necessarily not know this, but they'll be able to know and say, oh, hey, this is what's going on with your car. This is what you need to address. All right, so we covered the engine bay. We covered your brakes, your rotors. You can do a quick visual, such as like, hey, let me just, insert my pad depth gauge, put it in here, and go from there. Or you can go as advanced as, oh, let me actually take action because my rotors or my pads are below the minimum thickness, so they're worn. Rotors as well. Once you take these indications on the rotors, we covered how to inspect your rotors. You can see if your rotors are wearing evenly. You can see if there's hot spots on the rotors, all by taking these numbers. So if I take 4 areas of each rotor and measure them, and maybe this area, has much more wear, and there's, you can see the grooves from the pads really kind of digging in that area, something's wrong, right? You might be going down the highway and saying, okay, hey, my wheel shakes between 50 and 70 miles an hour. What's going on? Chances are the front rotors are warped, or maybe there's something balancing with the tires. But these measurements will tell you these things. So it's not necessarily just for the half mile, but it's more for any just keeping up with your car's health, keeping up with your car's safety, and you being more connected with your vehicle because like what condition is in. So let's stop right there for a moment. I'm going to check my phone here. I'm trying to manage multiple things here. There's people sending me questions through here, through the live chat box, and it seems like YouTube might be coming in. So I'm trying to manage all that right now. Let's go into some of the questions that we have here. Again, if you're in here, if you're in the chat box, go ahead. Type in your questions. We'll definitely help you. Okay, so questions what I have here. Let me see here. Okay, let me go to the group really quick. Okay, so I'm not going to say who asked the questions. I'm just going to ask the questions. I don't want like people to be like, oh, there is no dumb question. The only dumb question is the one you don't ask. Okay, so the first question is, I guess I talked about cooling, heat. Can you elaborate a little bit more on heat? Okay, so we covered that earlier. We're going to get into this a little bit more, but what I mean is, I covered this earlier, but heat basically, it could be on a supercharged application. It could be your worst enemy. We did, there's a video, this person has a Z06, so there's a video that we did on LT4 and why adding an upper pulley doesn't work in that video. So I'm going to share it with you privately, but in that video we cover heat, thermal management, and fuel system. But the gist it is, think of the engine as an air pump, right? We want to get as much air in and out as quick as possible. The more we're efficient at doing that, the more we're efficient at making power. You're going to make more power if you can get that air in and out as soon as possible. Obviously, there's some factors that are in there, DA, what's the elevation, what's the outside air temperature, but generally the goal with heat is to keep heat manageable, to keep heat in a certain operating range or within a certain operating range, and that's why we stress some of these cooling mods. So heat is your enemy. It can also be your friend. In the LT4 specifically, the main bearings, I want to say they're polymer, and basically if they get exposed to excessive heat, they will break. And if you break a main bearing, something's coming out of the side of your block. So at a minimum. So, and it's not cheap to fix these LT4s. So hopefully that answers that. I'm gonna cover that. I don't want to go too much into detail on that because we've already covered that. But let me know if it doesn't. Just message me again and we'll go from there. All right. Next question. Okay, you guys like heat? Oh, this one was asked from the DM. It's pretty relevant here. What things should I look out for when racing my car? So when you're racing your car, it really depends on what kind of racing you're doing. By all means, I'm not a track coach. I'm not claiming I'm a track coach. I have been in a lot of road courses. I've had hosted private track days. I've worked closely alongside track instructors. I've worked closely alongside, Ryan Cunningham, my business partner, and I've learned a lot about thermal management, and I understand what's going on. So when you're racing your car, there's no one for all excuse, right? Or not excuse, sorry. There's no one for all solution, and what I mean by that is someone who is on the drag strip may not necessarily have to worry about some of the things as a road course person. Someone on the road course, they'll have to worry about a lot. Someone on the half mile may not necessarily need to worry about, the same things as someone on the road course, but they need to worry a little bit more about someone on the drag strip. So the way I like to approach things is, let's look at it. Think of it this way. How long am I going to be wide open throttle or exposing that car to where it's generating the maximum heat, right? So when you go wide open throttle, you're demanding from the engine everything that it's got. So it's going to work as hard as it can for that duration that you set, and that duration is controlled by your right foot. So 10, 11 seconds, not a big deal. Go do a pass, come back. 20 seconds, that's a lot can happen in 20 seconds. So just be mindful, make sure, have your gauges up. So what I'm going to look for what things should I look for when racing my car? One, make sure your heat is good. Make sure obviously your safety equipment is good, in which we're covering. Make sure your car is in good shape. Tires, brakes, etc., seat belts, you name it. And that's pretty much it in terms of what should you look out for. If you have any kind of specifics, if you want to give me a little bit more on what exactly do you do with your car, I'm able to kind of maybe really hone in on that specific area, and hopefully that helps. So in general, safety, make sure the vehicle is ready, and make sure you're ready. We're going to get in that in a second. Okay, next. Tires. What tires are best? Let me see. Here it is here. Okay. Next question is tires. How do I know what tires are good for my application? This is a very general question. It's a good question, actually. There's no general answer to this. The truth is, I don't know, right? There's so many variables here that aren't discussed that without being able to hone in, I really can't give you a solid answer. So, and what I mean by that is, again, how is this vehicle being driven? Are you going out 10 seconds at a time at a quarter mile? Are you launching on an unprepped surface, like a half mile or a street race? Or are you looking for grip over time in turns and etc.? So a lot of I'm going to touch a little bit here because I really like this question. It's very good. A lot of people think, you go on the forums, you go on the internet, and you see people say, oh, R888 Rs for everything. Although I agree that they're a good all-around tire, the reality is there's no such thing as a all-around tire. So when we look at tires and we look at performance cars, we have to take into account, we have to give something for us to take. So what do I mean by that? So if we want maximum, traction, so let's use a drag strip. Most of you guys are drag racers. It's a prep surface. We're launching. We can leave pretty hard because the compound's going to help us hook up. So what tire is going to be good for a drag race really depends on your application. Like an auto car is probably going to benefit more from a drag radial, right? For the average street car, put a drag radial on it, launch it on a prep surface. What's the cons of a drag radial? The cons are you're not going to be able to turn. That car is going to do horrible. It's going to be very dangerous in the rain. And why does a drag radial, same as a bias ply, which we'll get into here in a second, why does a drag radial cannot, why does it do that? Well, in order for us to understand, we have to understand, like, well, what is the drag radial used for? Well, the drag radial is used to launch out the hole, right? So the sidewall is going to be it's not going to be as stiff. It's going to have a soft sidewall. It's probably like an R2 compound, and it's going to, once it gets hot, it's going to generate that sticky, I don't know if, I don't recommend this, but if you ever done a burnout and, come back through the pits, you see the car collecting a bunch of rocks and stuff. And that's the rubber just really trying to kind of stick to the surface. It's trying to grip to whatever it can. In this case, it's going to be asphalt, or on a drag race strip, they're going to spray that VHT. That kind of, I look at that as like glue, is an adhesive, but not really, because the bonds inside the actual rubber of that R2 drag radial is going to really try to grab that, try to stick to that as best as possible. The best way I can explain it is look at a top fuel dragster launch in slow-mo. Or for the average person, if you don't have time to do that, have you ever stepped in a piece of gum? Like you're walking out, it's a hot day, maybe you're at the park or whatever, and you just step on a piece of gum, and the minute you lift that foot off, the gum comes with you, right? It sticks to your shoe. It's really hard to get out. It's annoying. It's frustrating. Well, that's kind of the same thing that happens on a drag radial on a prep surface. So they spray the VHT down, you put heat on there, the adhesive starts to bond with one another, and that's how when you leave, it's able to launch out the hole really hard. And usually those drag radials, they're a lot stickier than your OEM street tires. So a drag radial, why is it good for automatic cars? Well, automatic cars don't suffer from drivetrain shock, or should I say like the manuals. In an auto car, you have your engine, transmission, torque converter, you have your drive shaft, you have your axles, your differential. So really your torque converter in your auto is really absorbing most of that impact before sending it to the rear wheels, right? So in an auto car, we don't necessarily have as much risk of, drivetrain shock, and drivetrain shock is usually for the manual guys. We'll get there in a second. So what it means is your torque converter and your trans absorbs most of that as it transmits the power from the engine down through the rear wheels. So you can run a drag radial. It's got somewhat of a stiffer sidewall, and the car is going to leave straight because your converter is absorbing some of that. On a manual car, a drag radial might not be the best for you. What I tell people is you have to run a bias ply and you have to run front runners. You see a lot of these folks, they'll run a drag radial they'll run a bias ply in the back and they'll run regular street tires in the front. That's a recipe for disaster. So why is that a recipe for disaster? Well, when you understand how does a bias ply work, it's similar to the drag radial, but except the sidewall is a lot softer and the cords in the rubber are just laid a little bit different. So because a manual car, like we don't have a torque converter. If you're a manual person, you don't have a torque converter. You don't have any of that stuff. You are controlling how much shock you deliver to the drivetrain by your left foot. So you're revving a 3,000, 35, 4,000. If you dump that clutch, you're sending all that power immediately to the rear wheels. So that's why you see the term that they call wheel hop. Like they'll dump the clutch and they'll just transmit all that power through the drivetrain. And sometimes the drivetrain cannot take it. So what ends up happening, you end up shattering an axle, you end up shattering a differential, you end up shattering, a hub, whatever, a drive shaft, whatever the case may be. So generally in a manual application, we slip the clutch. That's why you see most of the seasoned drag racers will say don't dump the clutch, slip the clutch. So slip it out pretty quick so you can get out the hole. And you don't shock the drivetrain because your bias ply is absorbing that. So the next problem here is when you run a bias ply with regular street tires, the bias ply is going to want to do whatever it wants because it's going to find what area of the asphalt to stick to. And that might necessarily be in the middle of the tire. It could be on one end, it could be on the outside of this tire or the inside of the opposite tire. So it's doing this and it's pulling the back end like that. So, what you see is you'll see a car going down the track and you'll just see it, it's either looks like it's going to spin out, or you see what they call crab walk. It looks like, like a crab walking diagonally, and that's because the tires are That's because the tires are looking for the best place to hook up, and the front radials are not the same, so they're trying to keep the car straight. And what ends up happening is they keep fighting each other to keep the car to go in one direction. So this is super dangerous. I don't recommend it. So okay, so a little kind of more there, but I thought that was a good topic to discuss. Okay, so hot lap, covered that. What should I do? So tires, what tires are best for my application? And again, it really depends, right? So auto's probably a drag radial, manual, bias ply. Depends on the platform. It depends on the weight of the vehicle. When we talk about other tires for the road course, like an R888R, those are still an R2 compound, but the sidewall is a little bit stiffer. And the way I look at how to understand sidewall stiffness is, imagine, you're driving, we're just going down the windy road and we're taking somewhat of a sharp turn, whatever the speed is, you feel your weight shift to one side of the car as you rotate that wheel, right? So that's exactly what's happening to the tires themselves. So that weight of the car is shifting to one end and is shifting towards the sidewall of one side of the car. So your sidewall is going to be from your rim to where the top of the tire curves into your fender well. So that's, like the 35 series, that's going to be the sidewall height, right? So a stiff sidewall is not really going to allow too much flex. So why is that good? Is because I can put a lot of weight on the edge of that that tire in that sidewall, and the sidewall is not going to flex. It's going to stay solid. It's going to stay rigid. So the car is going to be able to hook up and really kind of carry through the corner. A soft sidewall is going to flex. So as I get there, eventually I'm going to get to a point, and the car's just, it's going to give. And if I'm in a good corner that's carrying some decent speed, the minute that gives, it's turning the car. So you're spinning out, you're going in circles. That's not good. So the R888, it's a good tire because it has a good sidewall, stiff sidewall, and it's an R2 compound. So people generally use them because the R2 compound can be used to propel that car, off the start at the drag strip or whatever. But the sidewall is thick, so we can't, if you dump the clutch at 4,000 RPM on an R888 on a prep surface that's sticky, something's going to break. No doubt. If you're a manual car, something's going to break. So generally what I say is, keep it within this RPM, slip the clutch out, and, just have fun. Because, if you out here trying to chase records on an R2 compound with a stiff sidewall, you might get your PB, but you might break 10 things doing it. How do I know this? I had a 5th gen Camaro and made 600 to the wheel manual back in 2013, 575, 600. I don't remember what it was. And that was me. I was trying to dump the clutch. It was just, I didn't really understand. And I just kept breaking things. I broke God knows how many axles. I broke differentials. I broke drive shafts. I upgraded my axles. I broke them again. So now I understand why that happened, but it's, definitely an expensive lesson learned. So in that case, yes, that's the R888. It's a good tire. People run them, but they do have their limitations. A stiff sidewall R2 compound is going to be able to, retain that heat, still perform in that operating range. So tires have an operating range where they want to perform, and that's why people use them, because once you get to a certain power, high 600s, low 700 to the wheel, your street tires don't do it anymore. So the R888s give you a little bit more traction. They give you the versatility of being able to leave somewhat decent at a drag strip. You can leave really well at a half-mile track, and you can road course it all on the same tire. The caveat is, remember, if we want something, we have to give. So we have to give, and then we can take. So the compromise is tread life. R888 does not last long. You might, 4,000 to 6,000 miles, maybe 8,000 to 10,000 miles, but don't expect 30,000 miles off that tire, because it's just not going to happen. So hopefully that kind of sheds light there. Okay, what else we got? So what tires are best for my application? Again, covered that. It depends, right? Are you in auto? Are you in manual? What kind of driving are you doing? Hopefully these tips kind of give you a better understanding as to tires and how they work and the different kind of compositions of the tires, and you guys can go from there. So, next question. I'm trying to stay relevant to this. Oh, what's a good starting PSI for tires? This is a good one. I'm gonna guess this person is drag racing. It really depends, actually, whether it's the half mile or I'm going to stick to drag racing and half mile here. I'll cover the road course as well and street driving. So for drag racing, it really depends, right? Like what kind of tire? Do you have a street tire? Do you have a drag radial? Are you on a bias ply? How much power are you making? Are you stock power level? Are you making 600, 700? 800, 9, 1,000 wheel, right? And what's your drivetrain? Like, are you launching off of idle? Are you a manual where we have to slip the clutch? Or do you have a two-step or whatever the case may be? This one, the best way I can explain it for us when we approach tire pressers is basically, I want to say trial and error, but at this point we have enough data that we know what's a good starting point for each tire, and then basically we adjust on that surface. What does that mean? So I'm going to use an ET Street R, Mickey Thompson ET Street R for the drag radios. This is it's a drag radio. It's very popular. A lot of the folks usually run this anywhere from stock to 1,000 plus to the wheels. So I'm going to use that for context, and then we'll go into different tires. So for the Mickey Thompson ET Street Rs, if I am racing, if like I'm going to use my car, but this varies again. You might have to play around with, see what works, see what doesn't. So if I'm going to, let's say, shift sector, not a prep surface, I'm launching just as if I would launch off the street. My starting PSI is going to be 18 PSI cold, right? Now, what's the difference between cold and warm? Cold is going to be, I leave the car overnight, I wake up first thing in the morning, set them to 18 PSI, load it on the trailer, go to shift sector. Warm, after you do your burnout, you make a pass. I would check them again and see how much they've gone up by. So for me, 18 PSI is a good start. What I normally do is I make sure they're at 18 PSI, both sides, and exactly 18 PSI. Invest in a high quality gauge. Like I know we have the ones that are in our cars, but go buy yourself a gauge. If you're going to be doing this, use a long acre, a manual gauge. I have a couple long acre gauges. Those are really good. You can check the air pressure. You can, let it out. And then I have a Milwaukee pump that I use to inflate it. But why do you want to do this? Because we don't want as many variations. Maybe this pump reads 26 on this PSI, but 28 on the next tire. And you're like, okay, well, what's going on? I just set them both at 26. And you're just like, okay, there's variances, right? So buy yourself a good gauge, like a racing gauge or something, whatever, Summit, whatever you want, and keep it in the car. I keep mine in the glove box. So I start at 18 PSI, I go make a pass, and then that'll tell me if I need to go up or down, right? If it's early in the morning, chances are the surface is not cold. It's not warm, so I'm going to be fighting traction off the line. But it's, again, we have to, there's a give and take, right? We have to give something before we can take something. So the lower you drop your PSI, the more traction you're going to get off the line. Top end, you're going to lose mile an hour. So finding that balance, it's really up to the application, how much the driver weighs, how much equipment's in the car, how is that car leaving. There's a lot of variables that, they're just a little bit too hard to explain, but just know that a good baseline, I guess, for the ET Street Rs is going to be 18 PSI on a not on a prep surface. For a stock car, this should work. Usually 18 is about fine. For me, I have to go a little bit lower as the day gets hot, as the day gets warmer, and the sun's beaming down on that airstrip on that half mile. Then I can go up a little on air pressure. So I'm not going to go into specifics as to what my air pressures are because I'd be giving away my secrets. But hopefully, with that information, right? If I start low on a drag radial, it's because I want to get out the hole faster. So if I was racing with a buddy and he was like, hey, let's do a heads-up race, my priority is going to be getting that car off the line. So I'm probably going to drop the air pressure so I can get them out the line. Caveat, half mile is a lot of distance. So you can put 2-3 cars on someone and right at the traps, they're zipping by you and they take the win. So That's another thing in general. So not necessarily focus, in a quarter mile, you might get 2 to 3 cars, and that's hard to make up, right? Because, by the time you guys launch, you're cutting what, 1.6 seconds on a 60 foot or 1.75, whatever the case may be, at the, you know, at the 330, which is, half of the 8 mile, you're at 2, 3, whatever, 3, 4 seconds, whatever the case may be. The race halfway done. At the 8th mile, race is halfway done. So you're not gonna be able to make that up. It's only a 9, 10, 11 second race. So half mile, 16, 20 seconds, you'll be able to make that up. So what I would say is approach it with, it depends on what you're racing. Quarter mile, cool. Maximum traction, you want to get out the hole, you got to lower that PSI. If the car happens to be leaving well and you're short mile an hour on the half mile on the big end, let's say hey, I used to do 146 spawn stock and I'm doing 143, but the car feels really, really, really solid leaving out of the line. Okay, cool. Well, let the car sit for a bit, check your tire temps again, and air them up, half PSI increments, 1 PSI increments, whatever you feel is comfortable. Just make sure it's even on both sides. So what you'll start to see, and I proved this time over time, is you'll start to see your car will pick up mile an hour on the big end. So you'll go from a 143, 144, 147, 148. So I mean, just for example, but you'll see that pick change with those small tweaks, and you're asking yourself, well, why? Well, why? How's this possible? Well, the answer is there's less rolling resistance, right? So we drop our tire pressure down, right? And we're getting more traction off the hit, but there's a lot of drags at high speed because there's a lot of weight bearing on that, and the tire's constantly trying to grab that surface. As we air up the tire, there's less rolling resistance on the asphalt, and then it's much easier. The way I can explain it is, let me think. I have a good one. Think of it as like in an airport, right? You go to an airport and you see the long conveyor belts, and they're really long, and they take you from one side to the other, and you just stand on them and they glide over, right? And then you have right next to it, you have just a general person walking, right? So imagine, from the hit, it might make sense to just walk manually, right? Because I could be like, okay, well, I don't have to trip getting on the thing, on the conveyor belt. I can just take my time and walk manually. So that would be your dig, right? It makes sense to take your time and get out the hole faster, so we want to start with lower PSI. But once we get up and running, guess what's going to happen? That person on the conveyor belt, if he starts walking, he's going to have 2, 3 cars on you. Why? Because there's less resistance. Like, I'm not walking on the ground. Something's propelling me. Something's pushing me. There's less resistance that I have on the ground that's allowing me to walk faster, even though I'm putting in the same amount of work. So think of it as that. Once we air up the tires in the rear, once those tires get moving, they're already moving. We've already hooked up, right? The car's already hooked up. It's going down the track. We have resistance now. If there's less air, they're just, they're sticking down. They're really trying to, if there's more air, they're inflated, and the contact patch is less. So there's less resistance. So that's going to be that person on that conveyor belt just kind of skimming past you. So part of what I like about, the half mile and quarter mile is finding that balance. Like, I don't go there to beat anybody. I just go there for me to have fun. If I beat someone, cool, but it's finding that balance. Like, hey, where's the sweet spot? And that takes a couple passes to figure out. And it also takes weather into account. In the morning, the track is cold. So basically, maybe I'll start at a low PSI to hook up. If it's around 12 or 1 o'clock, the sun's being beaten on the track, I know that surface is hot. I'm on a drag radial. As soon as I do my burnout, that tire is going to grip, it's going to hook up. So I can get away with airing it up 1 or 2 more PSI, or 3 more, 4 or 5, whatever the case may be. So generally, in this situation, what I would do is play around with it, have fun. If you're on a prep surface, look at your 60 foot. Your 60 foot is going to tell you if dropping the air pressure made you faster or slower. If you're at a half mile, we don't really care about getting out the hole because it's based off trap speed. So someone can beat you to the finish, and as long as you trap higher than them, you win that race. Doesn't matter how long it takes you to get over there. So in that case, I would look at the mile an hour on that slip. So you get your mile an hour. Oh, I hit 144. Hey, I went up 2 psi. I picked up 3 miles an hour. Okay, so that's telling you that what you're doing is right. And eventually you'll start to go up, and you'll hit a plateau, right? Like you keep airing up, and it comes to the point where you're blowing the tires off so much in the beginning that you're not able to make that top speed up at the end. So then you're like, oh, okay, cool. I went too high. I need to go back down. And then you have all your slips lined up, and you can say, okay, well, my best 60 foot and mile an hour was at this tire pressure. So generally what I do, and I tell my customers to do this, is if I'm at a drag strip, I'll write down my launch RPM and tire pressure as soon as I get that slip. So I go I'll set the tire pressure, look at my launch RPM, light turns green, I go. As soon as I grab that slip, go into the pits, and I'll write, whatever the RPM is. I'm not going to tell you what I launch at, but whatever the RPM is and whatever PSI is. And then I just highlight the 60 foot and my mile an hour. My mile an hour at the end of the traps at the 330, 8th mile, etc. So that tells me, okay, this is my baseline. So for example, let's say 2,500 RPMs. Now, I don't launch at 2,500 RPMs, but let's say 2,500 RPMs, you're able to cut a 1,660 foot, and you're maybe on a Mickey Thompson, right? Which that's not bad. That's not bad. Your car makes what, 600, 550 to the wheel, a ZL1 or something. You're cutting a 16960. That's pretty good. That's actually really good. So if I cut a 1.6 and my mile an hour is, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number here, 125 miles an hour, and I'm running an 11.0 or a 10.9, that's pretty good, right? Because later on, I'm going to start making these changes, and I'm only going to see, 126, maybe 127. I'm not going to see much more than that. So if in one of those passes in the earlier of the day, I'm able to launch at 1,700 RPMs or 2,500 or 2,000, whatever the case may be, and I'm able to cut a 1,660 foot and trap 125 or 120, close to 126, that's a solid pass. That's your best pass right there. So what I do is that's my benchmark. The next morning, chances are the weather's going to be pretty much the same. That's my benchmark. So I set the PSI at whatever PSI I had, and I launch at the same RPM that I launched at that glory pass, as they call it. And then from there you can work. You can say, okay, wow, I ran faster, or man, the car really hooked up. I got a 150 60 foot. Like this is great. Okay, cool. A, I can leave a little harder. B, I can air up the tires a little bit more to pick up mile an hour on the big end. And in that case, it's small increments, half a PSI, 1 PSI. So let me go ahead and cross that out. Okay, so, wow, Jesus. Next question here. Actually, that's a good question. I already have that written down here. What should I look at when racing my car? We covered that. Is it okay to hot lap modded? What tires are best for the application? We covered that. What's the starting good PSI for tires? We covered that. I didn't cover the road course stuff. Road course is pretty similar. But in the road course, we're not shooting for mile an hour. We don't really care how fast we go. We don't really care how fast we leave the line. We just care about being able to get in that apex and get out of that apex as soon as possible. So the best way my driving instructor explained to me is the best way you can turn a corner into a straight line. That's what we want to do. So that's what's going to make you fast. So understand your braking zones. Wherever you can cut a corner, well, the best line is going to win, right? So on a road course, basically we want an equal balance. So if I had an R888, I would start off at around 28 PSI. That way when they're hot, they're up there in like the 32, 33. Depends on the track. Depends on the weather outside. But nowadays we have the PDR, we have all these recorders, aim point, all these race renders. I really focus when I'm on the road course is the little G meter, because that's your traction circle. So on a road course, I would probably focus at around 28, 30 PSI. And then if I feel, if I'm going into a turn and the car is understeering, then I know, okay, I need to make an adjustment. But if that car is going into that apex exactly like I want it to, and I'm on that line and I don't mix that apex, I'm not messing with those tire pressures because they're good. All I'm messing is wear. Like, am I going to get these tires too hot to where they're greasy, or am I going to chew through an R888 in a weekend? Like, is it possible? Yes, but is it realistic? Not if you take care of it. So generally what I do is on the road course, I'll do a warm-up lap, right? Get the tires warm, get familiar with the track, let everybody go. Don't worry about them. Let them go. Get familiar with the track, and then my next lap will be a little faster. And then usually, like my third lap is where I'm like, okay, I'm really feeling the car. I'm putting it through its paces. Okay, cool. Bam. My temps look good. IATs are manageable. All the stuff is good. The car's not really telling me anything's wrong. So probably my third or fourth lap, that's when I'm going to try to get that PB or whatever the case may be. So once everything is good. So for the road course, what's a good starting PSI? It really depends on the tire. On an R compound, you can go 28, 30. They like to be 33-ish, give or take. It depends on the track. So play around with it. Look for those cues, right? Like if you go into a corner and the car's understeering and you're not really carrying too much speed, then okay, hey, I got to make an adjustment here. Like this is not happening. There's too much drag on the front, or hey, maybe the rear's too tail happy. Maybe I have too much air in the back tires. So yeah, take that. Focus on the line, work on your line first, get your line dialed in, and then really try to push the car in baby steps. So if you felt confident the way you took one turn, the next time around, try to go a little faster if you can, but not like, let's not try to go 10 miles an hour faster going into the same apex. Let's do maybe like 2 or 3 miles an hour and see what that does, right? Keep the same things and see what that does, and that'll tell you. So what I use is the little G forces, because anytime you see the movement, right? You see the little thing and it goes here and here. That's what they call your traction circle. So anytime that little ball goes outside of that, that means you're breaking traction and the car is sliding. So you don't want that, because you'll get to a point where you'll put it in for the Camaros, Corvettes, you put it in race mode, or you're turning everything off like me. Sometimes the traction control gets in the way. So I'll get to a point where I'll shut everything off and I'll just drive. And I really depend on, okay, cool. If I take this corner, if my braking zone ends here and I'm coming into this corner at 60 miles an hour or 62, 63 miles an hour, that's where I want to stay on this corner, because the car's planted, it feels good. It hit the apex exactly where I wanted to, and I was able to get on the throttle sooner and carry out and set myself up for the next turn. So really play with it. This is a good question. There's no starting PSI for the road course. There's no starting. There's good baselines for the half mile and for the quarter mile, but for the road course, there's too many factors. What kind of tires are you on? A street tire? Are you on a drag radial? Are you on a bot? You're not gonna be on a bias ply, not on the road course or a drag radial. Okay, so hopefully that helps there. That sheds some insight there. So let's recap real quick. I see the questions coming in here left and right. You got to find a way of managing them as best as possible. Here's another one. Okay, so far what did we cover? In preparation for a race event, first things first, safety at hand. So a visual inspection on your car, do a walkthrough, look for dents, look for obvious signs, look for things that just take note of it, where everything is. Maybe one of your rock guards is missing a clip, or maybe your side skirt is loose, and let's try to address those. The second thing we want to do is we want to check all of our fluids, check our oil, check our transmission or differential. Make sure those are good to go. Differential is kind of hard to check. Usually what I do is I flush it, I change it right before a track day, and then have at it. Transmission, if you're auto, you can get away with a little more. Manuals, stick to the service guidelines. I could definitely help you there. So next we're going to look for FOD, so foreign object damage inside the engine bay. So that 10 millimeter wrench you're going to look for. So visual inspection in the engine bay, 10 millimeter wrench you left, or maybe a clamp to your cold air intake is loose, or a spark plug wire boot is resting on the header and is starting to get burnt up. These are things that are going to save you a lot of money in the long run, because if it's Wednesday night and I see a spark plug boot that's loose, you can go on Summit, or usually I have on the shelf or something, and I can replace it right away. Rather than if I go to the track and the spark plug boot is loose or burned or charred, it's going to chew through and burn it up, and I'm going to get lean codes, misfire, and then I'm going to have to be like, hey man, can you call someone up? Can you run me to the store? Go to AutoZone, go here, because you've already paid for the track day, right? You've already spent for the fuel to get there, the trailer to tow, whatever the case may be. You spent a lot of money to get to the track day, so you're probably going to want to be able to run both days or one day to whatever the track day is. So it's better to plan sooner. It's better to be prepared than going up there and really missing out. So, all right, so we covered that. Looking at brakes, make sure I went over some tips on how to inspect your brakes, how to what I do to inspect my brakes. By all means, if you're a technician, if you got other ways to do it, definitely let us know. Drop in the comments, DM me. Hell, you can even be we'll do another webinar and I'll have you up as a guest and you can share that as well. So we talked about tires, difference between tires for your application, like what tires are good for a road course, what tires are good for a drag race, what tires are good on a manual, what tires are good on an auto. We also went into good starting PSI. We talked about is it okay to, actually we didn't really cover that one. Is it okay to hot lap your car? Okay, wow, this one's good. Is it okay to hot lap your car? Okay, depends. I don't know the context here. I'm gonna assume it's a drag race or a half mile. Generally, this one on a supercharged setup, like an LT4 or something, I don't recommend it. Not even if you're on stock cooling, don't recommend it. Some of these Z06s, these C7s, they're going into limp mode. They're shutting down. They're engine power reduce, and they're not very good at managing heat. They're good to cut through the air, but aerodynamically, in terms of getting air into the heat exchangers, they're horrible cars. So any LT4 stock cooling, I don't recommend it. What I do, even on my setup with cooling mods, is I'll make a pass down the half mile. I'll let the car cool down 20, 30 minutes, and I'll go make another pass. I don't like to hot lap my car. If I do, I have a bag of ice ready to go, and I'm dumping ice right before I make the pass. But generally, I don't hot lap because, one, I need to look at the logs. Two, I need to examine what I did wrong. Did I launch okay? How did that feel? What's my mile an hour? Let me watch the video and see how did the car leave and see if I can launch harder, if I can launch sooner. So that takes a little bit of time. Usually I want to go drink water or whatever the case may be. So I personally don't recommend hot lapping cars. And there's some arguments about, what if I had a inner chiller, or what if I had this, or what if I had that. Again, this is my take on it. This is our take on it right here. Not saying it's a bad unit, but I think for the quarter mile, it's really good. If you want to run an inner chiller, cool. Again, 9-10 seconds. When you're doing 20 seconds plus, I'm going to use the Camaro example, whether it's a supercharged SS or ZL1. I think that it addressed the cooling part, hands down. It's good at that. But what it doesn't address, and you'll see once you guys start getting into this high horsepower level, the transmission temperatures aren't controlled. Because in order for that to work, the car needs to be idling, right? So you need to be idling, and the AC needs to be running and diverted to whatever the heat exchangers are. But the problem is there's no cooling on the trans. You're just idling, and it's just radiating heat. So there's a lot of things that people don't know about these 10Rs, 10L80s, 10L90s, 8Ls. So anything in the 2016 up Camaros, Z06s, ZL1s, Mustangs, any of the 810s and newer 10 speeds, they only have a certain range where they like to operate. And I want to say it's between, don't quote me on this, I usually just go by the GM service requirements, but I want to say it's between, it's 45 degrees Celsius, so 45 to 65 degrees. I might be wrong there. So 45 to 65 degrees Celsius is where we want to be. And what happens is pretty much 180, right? So we want to be between 160 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit is where we want to be. When you get above 185 degrees, that trans starts shifting sloppy. It just gets mad. It's got the Dexron 6 ultra low viscosity, which is a very thin transmission fluid. That's how it's able to roll through the gears and do the whole rev match and all that stuff. So not rev match, but the performance shift. But it's super thin. That means that it cannot hold heat very long. So once you get above 185, I mean, my car does it on the stock trans. Pretty much every car above 185, it starts to shift sloppy. Like, you may not see it, but you'll see it in the log, or you'll hear it on the track, and you're like, oh, that was. And why is it doing that? It's because the trans is not happy. So the TCM is like, no, I'm not going to take this. Give me this much. This is where I'm going to shift. And it sounds really lazy. So for those long half-mile stuffs, like there's a lot of factors that don't go noticed in these kits. So yeah, so we can keep the car idling. It'll cool down. So yes, our blower is cold, but our trans is hot. Our diff is hot. And you know, if you're on a stock driveline, a stock axle, that's you're compromising that. So if you're making twice the power, you know, in my case, I'm making 2 times as much as what came stock, and I'm a stock driveline. I don't want to do that. I want to keep that trans between that 45 to 65 Celsius range, or you know, whatever it is, 160 to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. I want to keep it there. So what do? I drive all the way to the front, park to the side, turn the car off, pop the hood. When it's my turn to go, I'll ice the tank, start the car up, do my burnout, go line up. By the time I'm done making that pass, I'm at top of 7th, maybe even 8th gear on the 10-speed. My trans is right there. It's 170, 169, 173. So by the time I drive into the pits, back my car up, I'm at 180. I shut the car off, open the hood, and just let it chill, right? When I start the car back up, obviously there's some heat soak there, but generally it's right down in that temperature. It's probably 140, 145, 150. So something to think about there. I think that, you know, we need to be mindful of not just keeping the blower cold, but we need to be mindful of, hey, is my trans, you know, do I have a trans that doesn't like to be operated outside of this temperature? By me sitting here idling, is that going to affect that? So when it comes to hot lapping the cars, I don't recommend it. Even with stock cooling, upgraded cooling, I think my car has really good cooling. And some of the stage 3s that we do really have good cooling, but I don't recommend it. Just chill, make a pass. You have 2 days to race. You'll get, I don't know, man, there's customers that have gotten, you know, 20, 25 passes in one day at the half mile, and I'm like, okay, so you have 50 passes in 2 days. Like that's a lot. Like you'll be all right, you know. So don't get anxious. Take your time, enjoy it. It's better to enjoy it and just be reasonable, cut a good time, than you try to kill, you know, crush a record or something. There's another question right here. Okay, there's another one too. Okay, so yeah, try to do that first. Let me get to these questions here. What are they saying here? Yeah, so try to do that first. Where was that? Oh, yeah, try to do that first. I don't really like the hot rod cars for that reason. So hot lap cars for that reason. So take your time. You'll have 50 passes, or what? Not 50, but you'll have a lot of passes, whether it's 1 day or 2 day. It's better for you to like really let the car cool, let the car be happy, let it be in its normal operating range. That way you can get the best performance and cut the best times. So some people might disagree with that, and that's totally fine. This is just our take. So respect everyone's decisions. Okay, so I think, wow, it's been an hour and a half. It feels like I've just been chatting for a few minutes. Okay, so let me go in now. I'm going to take some time. For those of you guys, if you're still in the room, go ahead and drop some in the chat box. I see some questions coming in, and I'm trying to answer them as best as possible. What else we got here? Okay, no, I think I already answered that one. I answered that one. I answered that one. I answered that one. Just want to make sure I don't miss. I don't see anything in the chat box. Okay, so again, I'm opening the floor up to you. If you guys have any questions, message me. I'll kind of stay here idling for a bit, just reviewing these all these kind of messages coming in, see what I can answer. I think I already answered that one. So again, this is a live stream. We're definitely going to be kind of posting this as well for those who couldn't make it. It's just a webinar. Getting a couple questions. Here's another one just now. Oh, there's this is live on YouTube actually. Let me just jump to that real quick. I'm kind of sorry for the YouTube guys. I didn't see it on there. Let me go to the question bank now. Voice is good, video is choppy. Yeah, so in order for me to be able, I'm looking at these questions right now. In order for me to be able to have this live, the video quality is a little bit low because it's not going to let people in the room. It's not going to let you chat real time. So I'm kind of compromising video quality for the actual content, being able to see your questions live and being able to stream on multiple platforms. So I do apologize about that, but once this video is kind of posted and done, you guys will be able to see the really good quality, the scale quality. So let me go here right now. I'm going through the questions right now. Make sure you guys it's located in Abilene. Is doing MS-109 make any performance goals? So let me go to this live stream. Wow, it's like why is it not? Oh, it's not refreshing on my end. That's why. Okay, sorry guys. I failed you guys. Here we go. Okay, here are the questions. Is doing the MS-109 makes any performance gains? This is more a question for Ryan Cunningham. I'll share what I know here. It really depends, right? What application is this? IK, you look very familiar. Okay. If it's an LT4 application, we covered a video where we talked about fueling and the substitute for fueling. So some of these guys, we run like the E50 package or whatever. Any car that's flex fuel, it's usually no cats or whatever. It's able to run flexible fueling. So what happens is, in order for us to kind of combat the weak high side when we get to a certain power level, or delivery to the high side and the low, well, not the low side, but delivery to the high side, which is what the limiting factor is, we generally run a better fuel. So like we'll probably make a little bit more power on 93 than we would on 91. A little bit more power on 95 than we would on 93. A little bit more power on 100, not necessarily power, but cooling on 100 than we do the other cars. E85 is more of an alcohol-based fuel. We have a whole topic on that I can definitely share. We did a free course where we broke that down into thermal management, fueling, etc. But it really depends. Race gas is definitely going to have some kind of heat dissipating properties, and again, it's an air pump, so the more air we get in and out, the easier it is to go. So MS-109 is going to have there are going to be some performance benefits, but obviously your car has to be tuned for it. So generally what we'll do here is we'll in this case we'll supply two tunes, like one tune if the car is not flex fuel or whatever, one tune for regular street driving, and then one tune for that dedicated race fuel. Whether that be 100 on the track, on the road course, we'll use the higher octane to be able to make a little bit more power, or MS-109, C16, whatever the case may be. So hopefully that helps. Someone mentioned tires and gearing are very important in the 2640. Yes, that is true. This is actually, I like this question a lot. I don't know who wrote this, but Yes, this is really good. And here's a perfect example, right? We have folks saying, I'm going to use the C6Z, so Corvette C606, because those cars crush it in the NA category. They're like mid 160s, like 165, 167, 170 miles an hour. And people are like, well, why? It only makes, 500-600 wheel to the tire. Gearing. So it really comes down to gearing. It's a light car. It's really got good gearing. So, these guys are doing 165 plus, top of fourth, maybe in the fifth, and the gearing is so long, it's perfect for the half mile. So to add to that, tires are going to be tire size, overall diameter, right? Like a 26 is probably not going to trap the same mile an hour as a 28-inch tall tire, right? But the 26 is probably going to leave a little bit better than the 28-inch tall tire, so or vice versa. But the point is understanding where am I driving this car and what is my end goal. Like, am I just trying to do a quarter mile pull? Am I trying to do a half mile pull? Where getting out a hole doesn't matter. Then we're gonna try to use our gearing and tire height to maximize that. The C6 Z06 on a cam setup might rev to 7,000, 75, whatever the case may be. So I can cross the trap at 7,000 RPMs. I mean, Ryan's car, he had a C6Z tall deck 477. I think he was like right at the factory hard limit of the GM EC. It was like 8,100 RPMs. So he was crossing the trap, fourth gear, 180 miles an hour, NA, just screaming. So why? Gearing, tire size. What else is here? Should I change my oil before every half mile road course event? That's a good question. That's really up to you. Oil does get expensive. I mean, if you're in our community, we do have that preferred membership that we offer for you guys. But it depends. If it's a stock car, and let's say if it's hot outside, it's 105 degrees, and you go out Saturday and Sunday, yeah, chances are you probably want to change the oil before you. If it's a street car, let's say you've been driving it on the same oil for 500 miles, right? You just changed the oil. It's been 500 miles. You go to the track, you beat on the car Saturday and Sunday, it's 105, both days. Monday, you probably want to change that oil. Same thing for the rear end. The way I look at it is like taking a shower, right? We take a shower. Such thing as taking too many showers, right? You can always clean yourself. So that's what I look at. But when it comes to these engines, it's not necessarily just kind of keeping it clean. It's actually removing some of these hydrocarbons, some of maybe something's wearing on the inside, just normal wear and tear. Some of these chips and flakes, we want to flush those out of the system, and we want to make sure we have the best oil in there as possible to keep the engine cool. The viscosity, the thermal management, there's a bunch of factors in there. But the biggest takeaway is, again, let's manage heat, let's put fresh oil in there, and then let's go about our day. Someone like me, for example, on my Z01, I will change the oil Friday. If I'm going to the track day Saturday, Sunday, I'll change the oil Friday. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I'm changing the oil and I'm changing the rear diff. It's kind of a personal thing for me. Some people say it's overkill, but again, I've been driving that car 10 months. God knows how many road trip, 1,000-mile road trips, like how many half-mile events, how many road course events. I tried to do the drag racing event, but I did an eighth mile pass and they told me I couldn't run. So to me, it's like, okay, I don't have a cage. Like, this is a street car. I spent all this money just to come to the track to not be able to make one pass. So maybe one day I'll put a cage in it or something and make a pass. But if you're wondering why I don't do the quarter mile stuff, that's why. It's not, for me, it's not like I didn't build that car to go to the 1320. I built it to be a fun street car and to see that the average person can obtain this. So I'm not going to hack up that car and put a 850 cert in there and then tell people, oh yeah, you can go buy a Z01 off the lot and run 8s. No, you have to hack it up. I'm trying to be realistic. Okay, so hopefully that answers that. It really depends on you. If the car's stock, you can probably get away with it. If the oil has been in there for 3,000 to 5,000 miles, maybe just change it before the track and change it after. I've never seen cars not stop at the 2640 event. So actually, me and some of my friends, we've actually pulled someone off of a car that flipped at 200 miles an hour and 195 miles an hour. He was a good friend of ours. So yeah, he went, lost his brakes, couldn't stop. The car rolled, flipped. We pulled him and one of our buddies out, and yeah, so it was a brake failure, and it happens a lot. It's not necessarily that they can't stop. It's some tracks they'll have a shorter stopping distance. So if you're doing 160, 170, 180, but you only have, I don't know, 1,000 feet to stop, like that comes up fast. So it's less than a quarter mile. So it's not necessarily not being able to stop, because it does happen, but it's more of like the amount of wear and tear that you put on your brakes when you try to stop at that speed if you're on a short track. Yeah, that's a lot. Like for example, Coalinga doesn't have a huge 7,000 foot runway, so you can do 2,640 feet and you still have room to stop. No, it's you don't have that much stopping distance. So what happens is, if your brakes are warped, if your pads are thin, you're clamping on those brakes really hard, and you're asking that car to stop in that short distance over 25 runs. If you're not 25, but let's say you get 10 runs one day, 11 runs the next day. At the end of that first day, there's a lot of wear and tear that goes on to your rotors, to your brake pads, to your tires, to everything, because you're just demanding to stop, 150, 60, 70, 80, whatever the case may be. And you got to stop to about 20 miles an hour to make that turn. So you have to do that after each pass, each patch, each patch. So it's not necessarily that the cars won't stop. It's more we're trying to avoid brake failure on these short tracks. If it's a long track, I mean, it still applies, but you have some buffer room, right? Chances are any cars that's doing, 180, 190, 200, they probably have a parachute, which helps a lot. So true. Thank you. Okay, so would a less modern vehicle with great prep driver outbeat a vehicle that has more mods and makes more power but has bad preps and drivers? Absolutely. That is absolutely correct. So, all right, guys. So the question was, uh, if a car makes less power and a better driver, can they outrun a car with more power and a poor driver? 10 out of 10 times that's going to happen. I mean, it happens with me. Some of the customers, we really show them how to like drive their car, how to launch from the hit, how to launch on the street, how to launch at shift sector. So they use that to their advantage, because they'll race. I mean, they'll race cars with make more power. They'll outrun them. I mean, there's a couple. I think there's a lot of cars. We have a lot of Camaros up north in the Bay Area. We did a 2020 Mustang GT. That car's outrunning people left and right, and that car should not be beating some of the cars that it's beating. Here in Texas, we have my car, obviously, we already know that. There's a 700 wheel vet. I think Wolfie Austin, his vet, he's gonna drop a video tonight. I'm gonna make a plug for him, but I think that answers that question. He's running 800, 900 horsepower Mustangs, C7s, Hellcats, and he's outrunning them from a roll race. And then people ask, well, how does they start questioning their builds, and they're like, okay, well, how is this possible? Um, how am I able to like beat this person, etc. And then I'm just like, well, it's look at it this way, right? Horsepower, torque is what's going to get you off the line, and then horsepower is going to keep you moving, right? So, however, there's one factor in here that we completely disregarded: traction. Traction is going to make or break the race, right? So here's what I find a lot of the people that I wouldn't say do wrong, but are doing incorrectly. They'll put, we'll put, and this is for the road course, this is for everyone. We'll put, an extra 140, 150 wheel horsepower on this car, and I'm going to use anything, Camaro SS, whatever. And then the owners will treat and drive the car the same way they did when it was stock. And then, they're going out here like, when I approach like a race or whatever it is, there's three things I look at. Okay, how far are we running? Are we running from a dig or from a roll? What kind of tires do we have? And then the last one, there's four things. And then the last one is, what kind of compound am I racing on? This is just for straight line stuff, right? So generally what I'll do is I'll make a shakedown pass just to feel the track out. It's maybe at 60%. And what I want to do is I want to get out the hole and see what the car does. And if you guys have been listening, tire pressure, all that stuff. This is why I do this. So basically that tells me the compound, that tells me how the car is going to leave. And then I look at, okay, what tires do I have? If I have a Mickey Thompson and the car left pretty good, I can get away with a more aggressive launch. I can get, maybe I can't, right? Maybe I have to ramp in a portion halfway down the track or whatever the case may be. But these are all factors that people ignore. And when you have an extra 100, 150 horsepower, that car's not going to drive the same, right? So people get in the car, I kid you not, they'll drive from getting 100 horsepower and go line up a money race. And I'm like, you're not going to go do some test hits? Like, can I give you some tips here? Nah, I'm good. And then they'll lose the race. And then they're like, well, what the hell? This car sucks. My tuner, blah, blah, blah. I got beat by a 400 horsepower car. Okay, well, maybe it's you driving. So, yes, I think that a car with less power, if it's efficient, again, this is an air pump. So if I'm efficient at getting power in and out, right, at all RPMs, then that power band is going to be pretty smooth all the way up, and eventually it's going to kind of plateau and then taper out, and then we're done, right? That's the end of the pool. So we can have cars with more power, more torque, but what we call, it's referred to as area under the curve. That power band is short, right? So we'll see a car that's maybe the stock graph is here and then it plateaus out. And then you have, a car that follows the stock graph, and then from, 4,800 to 5,200, 4,800 to 6,000, it dips up on the curve. And you can see this on the dynograph. And then when it gets to 6,000, it plateaus back to the stock. So a good car should pick up power through the entire RPM. It may not necessarily pick up peak power, but it'll pick up power all across. So let's say we start to pull 3,500 at 4,000, and I'm going to try to do this as best as I can. At 4,000, here's the stock. This is the dyno graph, obviously, and this is the tune graph. This is the stock graph. So at like 4,000, we're coming up here, and then maybe this car's up here on the curve, climbing, and then it kind of plateaus and crosses over. So the area where the new graph has more, we call that obviously under the curve. So that tells you a lot about the car, right? Like the dyno graph is broken down into RPMs and what power, so horsepower over RPM, right? There's actually a formula for it. I don't remember. I think it's like torque. Let me see. Engine delivered torque over time divided by 52 over 52, something like that. I don't know the equation. If you guys know it, comment below. So basically, I use that information, and I'm sure a lot of tuners do this, a lot of well-respected shops. This is how they know what RPM can you launch at, what's a good starting point, and then based on that, they'll say, hey, start at this tire pressure, because when you get to 4,800 RPMs, you're really going to open up, so you're going to blow the tires off. So yes, there's a lot of cars that make less power, but they might make more power under the curve. So what does that mean? Like, yes, an 800 horsepower car might peak at 800 RPMs at, 59, 6,400 RPMs. Let's say 6,400 RPMs, just for, so it'll make 800 wheel, 797 torque at 5,900 RPM or 6,400 RPMs. But from 4,000 RPM, it might make like, okay, 400, 500, 600, 800. And then you have a car that might make 700 and, 90 horsepower, 770 horsepower. But at 4,000 RPM, that car is making 40 more horsepower than that 800 horsepower car. At 5,000 RPM, it's making 35 more horsepower than that 800 horsepower car. At 6,000 RPM, it's making, maybe that 800 horsepower graph dips. Maybe it's probably making 60 more horsepower. And then eventually it peaks out at, 797 and then plateaus off. So what does that translate to in the street? Car distance, right? So I don't know. There's no rule of saying that, hey, 40 horsepower is one car length, but you see it in the video. You'll see some of these lower horsepower cars that have efficient packages. They'll just yank out the hole, like, 1, 2, 3, and that car's gone. That easily puts 2 cars on an 800 horsepower car. And what happens is the 800 horsepower, when it gets in its prime operating range, it'll start creeping, but guess what? Then it grabs the next gear, whether you shift it manually or the automatic transmission goes into the next gear. Now it's falling out of its power band, while the lower horsepower car, it's still in its peak, right? So what happens is it reels in, grabs the next gear, kind of falls off, and this guy's pulling. So it's kind of a game of a cat and mouse. Like, this will yank out the hit. I got more horsepower out of my power band. I'm still in my power band. I got more horsepower out of my power band. I'm still in my power band. So what ends up happening is, in real life, you'll see that, and you'll see the lower horsepower cars. They'll get to the half mile, and they might trap lower. They might trap, 5, 6, 7 miles an hour lower, but they beat them to the finish. So if we do that in a drag race, that lower horse, or a roll race, side by side, 1320 roll race, I think that's pretty common down here. That lower horsepower car is going to get to the traps quicker. It's going to get to the traps sooner because it's using the power more efficiently. Not necessarily saying it's making more power. This is I think this is a double-edged sword, because it really depends on where your power is. So if you're making power early on, you can really just might not want to leave as hard because you're going to blow the tires off. But if you're making power in the later, then that's when you want to get on the gas and really stand on it. If you're on a prep surface, that changes things. You really have to look at your 60-foot, your traction, etc., and go from there. Great question. All right, what else we got here? Oh, I see. Over here. We really don't do advertising here. This is just more to help our customers, and now we're in Texas, so we're trying to just kind of network with the community and just help people, right? This is free. But yeah, we're always looking for networking and building relationships. So if it looks like Dias Air Force Base or whatever the case is, that an Air Force Base? I don't really see military installations at a half mile, but if that's like a shop or something and they want to talk to us, feel free to share this information with them. Tires, gearing, trains new, always, I've seen. Okay, so I think that's really all that we have right now. Again, this video is going to post a little bit here later. Let me just double check the chat. Let me check my messages real quick. Okay, I think that's all right. So let me just double check here. Okay, getting requests here. No. Any last questions? All right, Charles. So yeah, that's it. If anyone has any other questions, I don't see anything coming up. Yeah. So yeah, in terms of next steps, we're gonna definitely try to keep this up at least once a month, at least until we get pretty. I mean, we're busy, but I have to make time for this, right? This is my day off, and I'm doing this because I really enjoy it. Definitely check us out, brcraceworks.com. We have that private community, and that's not private, but that tech center, and we're posting free courses, and we're just kind of trying to provide value. There's a lot of impact that we've made between myself at CCNC and now working with Ryan as BRC Raceworks. There's a lot of impacts, and we just feel that this information can be kind of shared more broadly, and it would help a lot of people because it saves people a lot of money, thousands of dollars on repair bills. So definitely give us some feedback. What do you guys think of the courses? What do you guys think? What do you guys want to see? The idea is to have this community, this tech center, and I know we run a couple Facebook pages for the Camaros and stuff, but the idea is to kind of like just integrate that all together and have something you guys can access 24/7. We will be offering some kind of paid courses that show you how to like install stuff, and I think we're going to bundle a series of courses and kind of obviously offer that for sale too. But for now, just we really enjoying this. This is my passion. I truly enjoy helping, and as I learned, I truly like helping other people. So definitely share this with your friends if you guys found value. Make sure you follow us, brcraceworks.com or brc_raceworks on Instagram or Facebook. Yeah, and we'll set something up next week. In the meantime, let me know what you guys want to talk about. If there's a topic, I plan to bring more guests in here, maybe different shop owners, just to kind of share their expertise. But yeah, let us know what you think. And yeah, we'll see you on the inside. Thanks again. And you guys have a great night. This will be kind of posted here shortly. So we'll see you again. Have a good one. Bye-bye.